Hi, so you should have watched the lecture video for week 5 about sensation and perception. And I believe that in this week also you need to watch this video about the review for our midterm 1. And next week, in week 6, we are going to have the first exam in our class for the Psych 1 18896. And it is a midterm exam. It means that the exam covers the content that we have learned so far. And in this course, there are 3 exams in total, and there are 2 midterm exams. And next week, there will be the first one. And let me introduce some important information that you need to know about the midterm 1. So right now you should see a document file that lists all the important information. So when will this exam will take place? So because it's online exam, it's not like the exam that you come to the classroom and you take it. So this exam will be on Canvas. I believe that you will see it next week in next week's module. And also you can find the midterm 1 under the quiz, under the quiz column, under the quiz folder. Yeah, so it will be available since the first minute of September 22nd, and will be end at the last second of the September 26th. That means that you actually have 5 days next week to take this exam. So you can start to take this exam between 12 a.m. on September 22nd and 11:59 p.m. on September 26th. So that's the period. There's a 5-day period that you can take this exam. Once you start to take the exam, you only have the 40 minutes to finish this exam. So it will not last forever. So it only lasts for 40 minutes. So after 40 minutes, you need to stop. So make sure that you finish the exam within the 40 minutes duration. So that's the date and time for the midterm 1. So remember, you can start to take this exam since the first minute of September 22nd. That is the Wednesday next week. But you need to take it by the last minute of September 26th. So September 26th is a Sunday of that week, of the next week. So you have 5 days to take it. Not really 5 days, but during this 5-day period, you have 40 minutes to finish that exam. So in the midterm 1, there are 30 questions in total. Actually, there are 34, but 30 questions are the questions that you need to answer. And there are 4 extra credit questions. So in total, there are 34, but you don't have to take that 4 extra credit questions. It's optional. They are optional. So within the 30 questions that you need to take, there are 27 multiple choice questions, just like there's a statement and there are 4 options. You need to choose one option. So that kind of a multiple choice question. 27 multiple choice question. And there are 3 filling in the blanks questions. It means that you need to type down your answer to answer that question. So and it will not be really difficult. So normally just ask you to write down 1 word or 2 words at most to answer that question. So it's not complicated. So most of the questions are multiple choice questions. You just choose the option. And the three of them, other three of them, and you need to write down your answer. So these questions are all about the content that we have learned so far from chapter 1 to chapter 5. So chapter 1 is about some introduction to psychology. Chapter 2 is about the research methods. And the chapter 3 is about consciousness. Chapter 3 is about biopsychology. Chapter 4 is about consciousness. Chapter 5 is about sensation and perception. So all the questions, all the knowledge that is covered in the exam will be listed on the study guide. So the questions will not be more than study guide. So you need to review the study guide and see what will be covered in the exam. So if somebody asks if there can be some questions that are not mentioned in the study guide but will appear in the exam, I should tell you that in this course, it will not happen. So probably some other professors probably do that, but it will not happen in this course. So all the questions are consistent with the knowledge in the study guide. And also there are 4 extra credit questions. They are all multiple choice questions. So they are like a little bit more difficult than the 30 regular questions. So there are 4 extra credit questions. And the next thing that you need to know is how many points are there for this exam. So this exam in total accounts for 15% of the total score. So this midterm accounts for 15%. So it's not a lot. So if you think that you do not do well in this exam, that is okay. That's only 15%. You still have a lot of chance. And each question accounts for 0.5% of the total score. So there are 30 questions, and these 30 questions account for 15%. So you can do the calculation here, and each question is like half percent of the total score. And each actual credit question is also the same. So each extra credit question is 0.5% of the total score. So 4 questions are at like 2%. Yeah. It's actually 2% of the total score. So there's a lot of extra credit in this course. And that's the basic information. And the main purpose of recording this video is to review the study guides from chapter 1 to chapter 5. So when you finish learning for chapter 5 in this week, please start to review for the midterm next week. And you can watch this video first, or you can like review by yourself and watch this video later. So let's look at the review guide, study guide, and review the content. Okay, so now you see the study guide on the right, and I open the lecture slides for chapter 1. So let's start to review for chapter 1. It's just the introduction to psychology. There's something about the meaning of psychology. So you should know that. You should know what psychology is. It is a scientific study of people's mind and behavior. That is the definition. You should know what that means. And Next part is about history of psychology, and here I list a table here. You can see you need to know some facts about the following people, and or some kind of a branches of psychology. So, for example, Sigmund Freud. So the fact you need to know is he developed what kind of theory. So what theory is developed by him? So if we find Sigmund Freud. So yeah, he developed the psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is a theory developed by him. And the next person, Wilhelm Wundt. So he was the first psychologist. He was the first real psychologist. You know, he was a person who used a scientific method to study humans' minds and behaviors. So Wilhelm Wundt, this German guy, was the first psychologist. And another guy, William James, he was a American. So he was the first American psychologist. So you need to know this. This guy was the first psychologist in this country, United States. So you need to know this. And the next, these two guys, John B. Watson, or BF, and B.F. Skinner. These two people are really famous for using a certain approach to study psychology. That approach is called behaviorism, because they only believe that humans' behaviors can be studied. Humans' behaviors only exist. Humans' minds and emotions, they do not exist because they are not observable. That's their beliefs. So John Watson, yeah, here in this slide, John Watson and B.F. Skinner are very famous for behaviorism. And the next is not person, it's a branch, or it's a philosophy in psychology. It's humanism. It's a branch that is totally different from behaviorism. So who are related to humanism? The first guy is Abraham Maslow. I found the lecture here, slides here. And the second guy is Carl Rogers. So these people are really important people in the development of humanism. And also you need to know who developed hierarchy of needs theory. That is Abraham Maslow. So you remember, for hierarchy of needs theory, there are 5 levels or 5 hierarchies of human needs. And the second big stuff that you need to know about chapter 1 is each branch of contemporary psychology. So you didn't know the name of every branch of psychology, and you didn't briefly know what each branch of psychology is about, right? So there is biopsychology, there is cognitive psychology, there's developmental psychology, there is personality psychology, there is social psychology, there is industrial organizational psychology, health psychology, and clinical psychology. Biopsychology studies the biological basis of human behaviors and minds, studies neural systems, endocrine system, and all that. How people like the anatomy of all the neural system and the all kinds of neurons and so forth. So that is biopsychology. And cognitive psychology, so the word cognitive means thinking or knowledge. So cognitive psychology actually focuses on studying how people think. What is the mental processes? When people think, what is the activities in the brain, in the mind, how the mind is working? That is cognitive psychology. So in cognitive psychology, there can be topics about sensation, perception. That is cognitive psychology. How people have senses, how people perceive those senses. And also later we will cover like memory, learning, how people learn, how people form memories, how people remember things, and also intelligence or logical reasoning. So how people use the logic to work out some kind of solutions. That all these topics are about cognitive psychology. And developmental psychology is about the study of how people grow up, how people grow old, how people develop across the lifespan. They study the characteristics of infants, characteristics of children, characteristics of adults, something like that. And the personality psychology studies personality. So personality is the unique and very stable patterns of every individual's thoughts and behaviors. So every individual has his or her own personality. So every person's personality is pretty unique. And every person has very stable and unique ways of doing things and thinking about things. That is the focus by personality psychology. And social psychology focuses on how people influence each other, because it is about social, right? So social means that people are together and they influence each other, they talk to each other, they do something to each other, so that every person is heavily influenced by everyone in the world. So the focus of social psychology is about that part. Industrial organizational psychology, it is about the application of psychology knowledge in organizations, such as management, such as in companies, how to manage people, how people think in the company. So that is industrial organizational psychology. Health psychology is also a applied branch of psychology. So they use this knowledge about psychology to improve people's health, including mental health and biological health. Clinical psychology, that is about diagnosing and treating psychological disorders or mental illness. Some people have mental illness or psychological disorders, or they have very problematic behaviors and emotions. So they need to be cured. They need to get the treatment. So clinical psychology is the study that focuses on how to give the right treatment to those people who have the mental illness or mental problems. So that is clinical psychology. So for chapter 1, that is just this stuff. So you don't have to remember each word on the slide. So you need to know what is important that is listed on the study guide. And the chapter 2 is about research methods in psychology. Let's look at it. So in chapter 2, the first thing that you need to know is the 5 steps of doing scientific scientific research. So there are 5 steps. First, you need to have a question. You need to ask a question to answer, right? So you want to answer a question, but first of all, you need to have a question. The second step, based on that question, you have some kind of a guess. That kind of guess is a hypothesis. You need to form a hypothesis. And the next step, you need to design a study, right? So you need to design a study to test whether that hypothesis is correct or wrong. And then next step is observation. So just observe what happened in that study. You really do that study and observe what happened in that study. And you collect some kind of information or evidence through that study. And the last step is to analyze the evidence that you have collected from the study. So the first one is have question. Second one, creating a hypothesis. 3, design a study. 4, conduct a study and observe what happened in a study. Of course, you have some kind of evidence. And the next final step, you need to analyze the evidence or analyze the data that you have collected from that study. That is the 5 steps of doing scientific research. So next, you need to know some concepts such as hypothesis. You need to know what it is. So it is like a educated guess. It's a guess, but it's not a random guess. It's from your personal observations, or it's from existing theory, existing knowledge. You want to predict something that is still not known. You are not sure about that. There's no real evidence about that conclusion, and you make a statement, you make a prediction about something. So that prediction is a hypothesis. And the next is the empirical method. So empirical method is the method that the researcher really observe the evidence. Evidence occurs during the study, or the evidence can be collected through the study, and you can analyze the evidence. So through either ways, the scientist or the researcher can directly observe the evidence. And through that, they can get some conclusions. That kind of method is the empirical method. So empirical is the same with you can observe the evidence, that kind of method. And the theory. So what is the theory? Theory is a set of ideas. So in one theory, there are a lot of ideas. These ideas are interconnected. They are not random. They are interconnected. They are well developed. Means that some kind of scientists have done a lot of studies, have done a lot of experiments or other kind of study, a lot of experiments to make sure the knowledge is right. These ideas are right. So they developed a set of ideas in one theory. So these ideas can provide the explanation for some kind of a phenomenon. Yeah, so that is a theory. And the next part is to know about the experiment. So what is the purpose of doing experiments? So there are different ways of doing research, right? So you can just interview with a few individuals. That is case studies. You can just observe behaviors directly in some natural contexts. For example, you can go to a company and observe them, observe how they work. That is called a naturalistic observation. You can send the questionnaires to people. They can fill out the questionnaires and you can get the data. That is survey study. But there is one study what kind of research that is very important. That is experiment. So experiments can help you to make sure whether the relationship between two things is whether causal or not. So causal means something causes something else. For example, A causes B. How do you make sure of that? How do you make sure that whether A causes B? You use experiments. So that is the real purpose of doing experiments, right? So why experiments are really important in science, because experiments can help us to make sure the exact relationship between two things, whether it's causal or not causal. So in other kinds of research, like a survey or naturalist observation, you can only make sure the correlational relationship between two things. Correlational means that the two things are related, but you cannot make sure that whether one thing causes the other. They are together, but they are not necessarily causal. It's not necessarily a causal relationship. Causal means that what does it mean by one causes B? It means that when A changes, B must change. Right? So A changes and B change. That is called a causal relationship. So when the relationship is not causal, when we say that A is related to B, it means that A changes, B might change or might not change, or that they usually oftentimes they change together, but we are not sure, right? So that is relational or correlational. But if we talk about causal relationship, it must be the case that A changes and then B must change. So experiments help us to make sure of that. So that's why we need to do the experiments. And there are three principles of doing experiments. It's listed here in this lecture, number 22, in this slide. So first of all, you need to keep all other factors unchanged or constant. So you need to want to study the relationship between A and B, right? So you do not want to have other things like C or D or E or F. So you need to make sure that in this study, in this experiment, only A changes. C, D, E, F, or any other things will not change. They are not changed or they are constant. They are all the same every time. And the second principle, need to manipulate A. It means that change the A, change the level of A. So how do you make sure that, how do you know that A is changed? So A can be on different levels, right? So for example, the example that we gave in this lecture is like ask the children to watch a video in which a person attacked a bubble doll, and that child will imitate the person in that video. So it means that the children will learn to imitate some aggressive behaviors. So in this experiment, what is A? What is the cause? What is the effect? What is the consequence? So the aggression behavior that is watched or observed by the children is the A, right? So the aggression behavior is A, and the B is the aggressive behavior of children. So they want us to make sure that whether watching somebody's violent behavior will cause children's violent behaviors. So how to manipulate A? So A can take in two forms at least. A can be like no violence in the video. And the second level is there is violence in the video. So A, in this case, A can take two levels. Level 1, no violence. Level 2, violence. All right, so experimenters in this study need to manipulate that, need to change the level of that. So in this specific example, they ask each children to go to that room and watch the video. But the video that they watched might be the video that there is no violence, but that video might be the video that there is violence. So what kind of video each children watch is based on purely randomness. So if they either watch the non-violence video or the violence video. So that's the manipulation of A. And the third principle is that in the experiment, the researchers need to see if B or the consequence changes or not, and in what direction. So they want to make sure, they want to see whether B is a real effect of A. They want to see whether if A changes, B changes or not. So that is the three principles of the experiments. And the third thing that you need to know about the experiment is know what happened to participants in the experimental group and the control group. So why there are two groups of participants or subjects? Because we need to manipulate the level of A, right? So we need to set up two levels of A. For example, watching the violent video or non-violent video. These are two levels. We need to assign the participants to the two groups. One is the experimental group and the other is the control group. In the experimental group, the change happens. In the control group, the change does not happen. So in this example of watching violent videos, in the experimental group, the child watches the violent video. So the change happens. The change happens. And in the control group, they watch the non-violent video. They still watch a video, but that video is not violent. There's no violence in that video. So there's no change in that group. In the control group, no change. In the experimental group, there is change. And all the participants must be randomly assigned to either the experimental group or the control group. So that is chapter 2, all the stuff that you need to know about. And the next chapter is chapter 3 about biopsychology, and that's probably a very intense chapter because it involves a lot of biological knowledge, and those knowledge is not that. I mean, it's really. It's just knowledge. That it's not like a reasoning or it's like there are some connections among some knowledge, but it's not like that. It's just like a display of what the physical body is like. So first, let's know about neurons. So there are different parts in one neuron. So a neuron is the building block of the nervous system, nervous system, yes. So there is dendrite. There is cell body or soma. There is a cell membrane. There is axon. On the end of the axon, there are terminal buttons, and outside of axon there's glia cells. That's the mating sheath. Mating sheath is a cover that protects the axon of a neuron. So you need to know what they are doing. So dendrites actually receive the information from other neurons. They connect to other neurons and they receive information. And the cell memory is just the surface of a neuron. Axon is the pathway of the information passing. So axon get the information from the dendrites and send the information to its terminal buttons. So terminal buttons are on the end of the axon. Terminal buttons send information to other neurons, to the next neuron. And the mating sheath is the layer outside of the axon that gave the protection of the neuron. And next, you need to know some concepts such as nervous system. That's for sure. You need to know what that is. So the nervous system is used for carrying and processing information in the body. So it's like a commander of the physical body. Get information and process information and send the information to the rest of the body. Includes a lot of parts, like the nervous system. Here has two parts: central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is the center of the nervous system that process all the information. The central nervous system includes the brain, that is the real center of the nervous system, and the spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system includes the somatic nervous system and the automatic nervous system. The automatic nervous system includes two parts: the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah, the neuron is the building blocks of the nervous system. So the nervous system is composed of every neuron, all the neurons. The glial cells are also the cells in the nervous system, but they are not neurons. They provide the protection and the nutrition to every neuron. Yeah, protect neurons, provide nutrition to the neurons, and then maintain the homeostasis, such as temperature, right? So need to give the warmth to the neuron and give the food to the neuron, give the oxygen to the neuron, and protect the neuron. And yeah, it's like glial cells are like the caregivers of neuron. Synapse. So synapse is a very small, tiny gap between two neurons. Yeah, very small space between two neurons. So in the synapse, the communication between two neurons happens. So that's how the information can be sent from one neuron to another neuron. That happens in the synapse. And the neurotransmitters are the chemicals, are the chemical substance that carry the information. So neurotransmitters are released by the terminal buttons in the last neuron, and they are released in the synapse. The dendrites of the next neuron capture those neurotransmitters. So when that whole process happens, we see that the information is communicated from one neuron to the next neuron. That is neurotransmitters. There are different kinds of neurotransmitters. Each of the neurotransmitters are like specialized for certain functions, but you don't have to memorize this table. You don't have to figure out each neurotransmitter is for what function, but you need to know what neurotransmitters are about. Cerebral cortex, it's a surface of the brain. Yeah, the surface of the brain. So that's where the processing information process happens. So the cortex, the cerebral cortex of the brain processes all the information. Hemisphere, two halves of the brain. And each hemisphere has different features or functions. And next one is somatic nervous system. So yeah, somatic nervous system and automatic nervous system are two parts of the peripheral nervous system. Somatic nervous system is related to some voluntary and conscious activities. It has motor neurons and sensory neurons. Because motor neurons send information from the brain to the rest of the body, so that the body parts can move. Sensory neurons send information from the sensory receptors, so for example, from the eyes, from the ears, from the skin, send this information to the brain so that the brain can know those senses. That's all the stuff in the somatic nervous system. Somatic means body. That word means body. So that's about some voluntary activity. But the automatic nervous system is about some unconscious, involuntary activities. So it controls something that is happening in our body but we do not know. We do not control of, for example, breathing, for example, heart beating, or also like digestion in the stomach. It just happens really automatically, involuntarily. So this part has two parts, like automatic nervous system has two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is about stress. When stress happens, sympathetic nervous system is activated. It starts to work when there is stress. But when there's no stress, sympathetic stops working, and the parasympathetic nervous system starts to work. And so parasympathetic is useful or responsible for some kind of a routine operation, such as digestion of food, such as relaxation. Yeah. And the next term, endocrine system. Endocrine system has a lot of glands. Endocrine system also like adjusts or controls our body, but it's a totally different system with the nervous system. Has a lot of glands, and the glands can produce a lot of hormones, and the hormones can make changes in our physical body, such as sexual hormones can make us have the sexual desires. Pituitary gland is the gland that controls all other glands. So that is the center, that is like a commander of the endocrine system, is the master gland. The pituitary gland only secrete hormones, only produce hormones that control other glands. So other glands like produce the real hormones that changes bodies, like sex hormones, sexual hormones. But the pituitary gland only secrete the hormones that changes other glands. So that's the way that pituitary gland controls other glands. And also in the node function of each lobe in the brain, in the cerebral cortex. So let's go back to the four brains. So four lobes of the brain, or the forebrain. Frontal lobe, parietal lobe, and occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. So frontal lobe about reasoning, about control the movement, motor control, about emotion, about producing language. That's about frontal lobe. Parietal lobe, it is about processing information, processing sensory information. So all the sensory information come to parietal lobe. Besides the visual information and the auditory information. Because these two kinds of information are processed in other parts, but parietal lobe processes a lot of sensory information from the rest of the body, such as the hands, such as the face, such as the tongues. That's the parietal lobe on the top. On the back, or on the bottom of the forebrain, that is temporal lobe. It is about hearing. It is about also memory and emotion, and it is about understanding language. So comprehending speech. So mostly about the hearing and understanding our language. That is about temporal lobe. Occipital lobe is about processing the visual information. So get the sensory information from eyes and process those information. So that is occipital lobe. You can tell that visual information, the amount of visual information is very huge, because one lobe only solely processes the visual information. So all auditory information is processed by the temporal lobe, but temporal lobe only has other responsibilities, and the parietal lobe processes all other sensory information. But only one lobe processes the visual information, because there's huge amounts of visual information. Okay, so next chapter, chapter 4, is about consciousness. So first, you need to know what consciousness is. Yeah, just the awareness of internal and external stimuli. So what is stimuli? Stimuli is some kind of a changes. So internal stimuli is some kind of a changes inside our physical body. External stimuli is the some kind of a change outside of the environment. So internal stimuli can include the pain, the hunger, the thoughts, emotions. External stimuli can include the visual information, the auditory information, the somatal sensation, so the touching, the texture of things, and also the temperature, the pain. Yeah, the pain is internal, but the temperature is outside. And also the gust, olfact, the smelling and the tasting information. So all that. That's consciousness, the awareness of those stimuli. Sleep is the low levels of physical activity and reduce the sensory awareness. And that is the sleep is different from wakefulness. So wakefulness is like the stage that the person is highly aware of sensory stimuli, and also high levels of thinking and high levels of behavior and all that. Circadian rhythm, because we are living on Earth, so that our physical body has been used to that fact. So we have a circadian rhythm of 24 hours, a biological rhythm that takes place over a period of 24 hours. Some kind of characteristics repeat over a 24-hour period, such as the body temperature change. So every night, the temperature drops, and every morning the temperature go back to the high temperature level. And in the daytime, the body temperature is relatively high. And the next is about sleep. So these three are about sleep: REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. So in that kind of stage of sleep, in that stage of sleep, so the eyeballs are moving quickly, but the eyelids are closed. And the brainwaves are similar to the wakefulness, but it's not wakefulness, it's still sleep. And the brain is working during the REM sleep, but the physical body is paralyzed. So it's very paradoxical in that stage, non-REM sleep. So in those kind of stages, there are 4 stages of a non-REM sleep. You briefly know what the stage is about. Yeah, so in those stages of sleep, there's real relaxation going on. And the next one is insomnia. Insomnia just like it's a sleep problem. Long delays between the times that they go to bed and actually fall asleep. So basically means that they try to fall asleep, but they cannot for a long time. Another symptoms of insomnia is like they wake up too early and cannot go back to sleeping anymore. And these are about drugs. So these terms, if a person takes some kind of a drug or substance too much, that person will have the physical dependence. So physical dependence is the changes in the physical body. If they discontinue the drug, they will experience withdrawal. That phenomenon is called a physical dependence. They physically depend on the drug. So what is the experience of withdrawal? When the drug is discontinued, the physical body will have a lot of negative symptoms, such as sadness, such as fatigue, feeling of fatigue, such as yawning a lot. So those are examples of withdrawal. So if they stop taking drugs, they have these negative symptoms. That is experience of withdrawal. If that person has the experience of withdrawal a lot, we say that this person has the physical dependence on that particular drug. Also, there's a psychological dependence. It's like if they discontinue the drug, they feel bad. They have the emotional need to take the drug. It's not the physical thing. It's not there's no physical change, but they have the emotional need to take that drug. That means, in other words, if they take the drug, they are happy, they are relieved, they are not stressful again. But if they discontinue the drug, they're sad, they're stressful. So it's totally psychological. Tolerance is a phenomenon that a person need to take more doses of drugs, of that drug, to achieve the same level of the effect. For example, somebody takes marijuana, and at the beginning he just take a little bit of marijuana and he gets really high, and he continues taking the marijuana and he's tolerant. Tolerance happens, and later he needs to take a lot of drugs, much more doses of marijuana to keep the same level of high. So that phenomenon is called tolerance. And also there are 3 kinds of drugs. Depressant, those drugs can suppress the central nervous system, such as alcohol and opium. And the stimulants can increase the level of the neural activities, can make the nervous system more activated. Yeah, the neural activities are more. So that is stimulants. Examples are like caffeine, nicotine, and cocaine. So when we drink coffee, we are excited, we are energetic because caffeine actually stimulate the brain, increase the level of the neural activities. Hallucinogen is the drugs that result in hallucinations. So hallucinations are alterations in sensory and perceptual experiences, such as seeing something that does not exist in reality, hearing some sounds that do not exist in reality, or have some kind of see something that is not real. And yeah, know the benefits and functions of sleep. That's the reasons for why we need to sleep here. Yeah, there are a lot of benefits of sleep. We need to know that. Okay, so the last chapter for midterm 1 is chapter 5, sensation and perception, also the stuff that we learn in this week, in week 5. So know some concepts first, sensation and perception. So that's for sure, we need to know that. I don't have to mention those two concepts again, I think. Absolute threshold, that's the concept about the sensation. So the stimulus must be strong enough, right? So the strength of a certain stimulus must be strong enough for us to receive that stimulus, to get that, to detect that information, to detect that the stimulus. So there is a minimal level for us to detect that kind of stimulus. So the energy of that stimulus must reach a minimum level to be detected for more than half of the time. It's about the chance. So sometimes we can detect that stimulus, sometimes we cannot. If we can detect that stimulus for half of the time, if we try it a lot of times, for example, 100 times, we can detect that stimulus for 50 times. And that's the lowest level that we can detect a certain stimuli. That is a absolute threshold. So yeah, we need to know that concept. And other stuff these are the parts in the eyes, in the eyeball, in the visual system. So let's find the visual system. So that's an anatomy of the visual system. So eyeball is like ball shape, and the outside there is a layer. It's called the cornea. Yeah, it's a cornea. It's a layer that protects the eyeball, and there's a hole in the front of the eyeball. It's a pupil. Pupil is a hole. Yeah, and behind the pupil there is a lens. Lens is a structure that is transparent and curved, so it can curve the light. So the lens can curve the light, can provide additional focus to the eyes. And the pupil is a hole, so this hole allows the light to come into the eyeball. The retina is a layer on the inner surface of the eyeball. It contains the neurons. What kind of neurons? Photoreceptor cells. So photoreceptor cells are the sensory receptors about the visual information. The visual Yeah, the vision sensory receptors. That's the photoreceptor cells. All the photoreceptor cells are on the retina. Cones and rods, these two photoreceptor cells are two types of photoreceptor cells. You didn't know what each cells is about. So the cones are sensitive to details so that it can provide a lot of high resolution. Also, cones are responsible for seeing colors. The rods do not work well to provide resolution or seeing the color, but rods can work well in the low light conditions, help us to see things in the darkness. Also, rods can detect the movements. So with only rods, if there are no cones in the eyes, we can only see black and white. But with the cones, we can see the movement. Without rods, what will happen? If there are only cones in the eyeballs, we can only see colorful pictures. It will be a picture and then a next picture and a next picture. There will be no movements, but it's really colorful. And next, we need to know how people see color. We need to know one theory, trichromatic theory of color vision. So there are three kinds of cones. One is for red, one is for green, and another one is for blue. So any color is a combination of the three colors, three original colors. And these two are about the ears. So it's like these are the structures in the ears. Cochlea is a snail-shaped structure that contains the hair cells. So inside the cochlea, there is fluid. And also on the inner surface of the cochlea, there are hair cells. Hair cells are in the are moving with the fluid in the cochlea when there is sound. So hair cells are the sensory receptors of the auditory information, or the sensory receptors for the auditory system. So that's where the hearing happens, in hair cells. So hair cells are the sensory receptors for auditory system. And the rods and cones are the sensory receptors for the visual system. So those neurons are very important for us. And the next one, vestibular sense. That's the sense about balance. We can maintain a balance and the body posture because we have a vestibular sense. We have a sense of whether our body is balanced or not. And also last, we need to know the 5 principles of Gestalt psychology. So Gestalt psychology helps us to know that we have some kind of patterns to perceive sensory information. So first one, figure ground relationship. We tend to segment or divide the picture into the object or the background. Yeah. And the next principle is proximity. Proximity means closeness. So proximate means close. So proximity means that the things that we see that are physically very close tend to be perceived as one group by us. That's the principle of proximity. Similarity means that the things that we see, that look alike, if those things look alike, they tend to be perceived as one group together. Continuity means that we tend to perceive some kind of a continuous and a smoothly flowing lines. We tend not tend not to see some broken lines. And the next principle is that we tend to see some complete objects out of some kind of random parts. Yeah, so you can see on the left that there are just some kind of broken parts, but we can see the circle here and the rectangle here. So these are all the stuff for chapter 5. So you can start to review for midterm 1 if you finish studying for chapter 5. And as I just said at the beginning of this lecture, of this video, the exam will take place starting from Wednesday to Sunday. So you have some time to review for the final exam. If you have any questions, any confusions, please email me through the email system or through Canvas. I can help you to answer the questions, help you to review for the final exam. And let's look at how to find the exam midterm. So if you open Canvas, this is a student view, and that's what you can see on Canvas. If you go to assignments, you can find a lot of quizzes, and also here is midterm 1 online, and you can click it. And it says this quiz is locked until September 22nd at 12 a.m. So it's locked right now. You cannot see it. When I recording this video, it's not that day yet, but you know what happened. And you click this, and you can start to take it. When it's unlocked, you can start to take the quiz. You have 40 minutes. Yeah, it tells you some information. You can find it in quizzes or in assignments, or there will be a module, week 6. Yeah, right now you can only see week 4, week 1 to week 4, but you will see the module week 6, and also there is a midterm 1 under the module week 6. You will see it. So either you can find it in modules or in assignment or in quizzes. That's how you find the assignment, the midterm 1. So so some last words. Make sure you can review all the stuff that you have learned from the slides, from the textbook, from the study guide, from those lecture videos. And importantly, you can review those quizzes, because those quiz questions, the questions in those quizzes help you to answer the questions in the midterm. So that's the tip. So review those questions in those quizzes from chapter 1 to chapter 5. And also when you take the quiz or take the final exam, midterm 1, make sure that you know the time, you know what time is due. You know, you need to finish every question. Make sure you finish every question. And also review the exam after you finish all the questions. Review it. So make sure every question that you answer is correct, because sometimes you know the knowledge, but you didn't do they didn't do right in that question because they didn't see clearly. They didn't read the answer right. They didn't read the question right, so they did wrong in that question. So yeah, so that's see in 2 weeks, because in week 6 there will be no video because there's no lecture, just doing the quiz. So in week 7 there will be the lecture about learning. So it's chapter 6. You need to read chapter 6 first, and see you in 2 weeks. And bye-bye.